Ladies and gentlemen, direct from the Universal Broadcasting Network, located at the historic Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, and locations across the country and beyond. This is Showbiz Nation Live with Michael Roberts. Your weekly look behind the curtain featuring the latest news, reviews, interviews, and performances with the artists that shape the magnificent world of the performing arts. I'm your announcer, David Friend. And now, curtain up, put your hands together. Here is the host of Showbiz Nation Live, Michael Roberts.
And when the sun comes trumpets from his red house in the east, he will find a standing stone where long I chanted my release. He'll build our house and chop our wood and make our garden grow. Where are the clouds? Send in the
Welcome back to Showbiz Nation. What an honor, Barbara Fitos.
Oh my goodness.
Send in the clowns.
Absolutely.
Right? We have the legendary JUDY Collins with us. And I am giddy. I don't get giddy very often. But Ms. Collins is going to be at the incredible McCullum Theater in Palm Springs, Palm Desert. Kind of the same
lovely,
thing.
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And on February 25th. And welcome to the broadcast, Ms. Collins.
Well, thank you so much.
So, Judy, if I may call you Judy.
Yes, of course.
So let's talk about actually your new album, which is
good.
absolutely incredible. It's called Strangers Again. And take us through the process of the creation of this album.
Well, I had found this song, Strangers Again, which is written by Ari Test. We do some concerts together, and I'd already recorded one of his songs, and I was looking through his material, and I said, oh my God, this is a great song, Strangers Again. And it was written quite a long time ago, about 15 years ago or something. And I said, has anybody recorded this? He said, no, it's just me. So I said, well, I want to get my hands on it before Diana Ross does. And so I said, I've got to do something. I'll put an album together with other singers so that we can get a bunch of interesting singer-songwriters or performers that I know, and we'll all sing some songs together, and then I'll get your song out. Hopefully Diana Ross will hear it, and then she'll record it.
Wow.
So that's what we did, and I called up a bunch of friends. I think I started with Jeff Bridges, who's such a doll. And,
yes.
I knew that he has a group, and he sings. I think it's called The Abiders, the group. And I had been to see him sing, and I've known him for years. So I thought, well, that's a good place to start, is with Jeff.
You've been a fool, and so have I, but come, I'll be your wife.
And let us try before we die to make some sense of life.
We're neither pure nor wise nor good.
We'll do the best we know.
We'll build our house and chop our wood and make our garden grow, and make our garden grow. I thought the world was sugar cake, for so our master said. But now I'll teach my hands to bake our loaf of daily bread. We're neither pure nor wise nor good. We'll do the best we know. We'll build our house and chop
Let dreamers dream what worlds they please. These Edens can't be found. The sweetest flowers, the fairest trees are grown in solid ground. We're neither pure nor wise nor good. We'll do the best we know. We'll build our house and chop our wood and make our garden grow and make our garden
And so he and I talked about what he would sing, and then it was the same to the other artists. I called Willie, and I called Michael McDonald, and I called Glenn Hansard, and got all these terrific guys together, and I had a wonderful time recording.
So here's a question for you, Ms. Collins. How has the industry changed in the many, many years that you've actually almost created a new genre?
Well, I don't know about a new genre. I started my own label about 16 years ago now because I knew the record business was just coming apart. It was falling off the tracks. You know, the train was just about to come to a complete stop as far as I could. As far as me and certain artists like me went, you know, so a lot of us, many people, most of us who have had long histories have started our own labels, following the example of Frank Sinatra. You know, he started the label within Columbia. I forget what it's called. Started with an R. Anyway, that was part of the change. Most of us, one of the changes is that most of us are on the road, which has made it extremely competitive financially. It also means that we have to work extremely hard at making a living in a way that was not exactly the same in years before. The competition is ferocious. Also, there are some things that help. Like I think people getting a hold of music, and I wish they always had to pay full price for it. Sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't. And companies like Spotify and these big companies that buy huge numbers of prepaid flash price music that's what kills us, you know, really. If they were paying full price, we wouldn't have such a hard time, but we have a hard time. So how has it changed? You still have to be creative. You still have to be writing a great song. You still have to keep in shape. You still have to be doing things that are exciting. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't changed at all. I don't know.
But even as far as getting songs played on the radio, I mean, there was a time in the 60s, 70s, and even early 80s, Ms. Collins, when you could have a great Broadway hit and still re-record it like you did with Send in the Clowns, and it could become an ancillary hit for you. That really doesn't happen anymore.
Well, it hasn't happened to me, but it does happen to people, and it does. I mean, certain things get through. I don't think many of us are listening to some of that radio that happens, but there certainly are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
But I think the basic premise is that the music business is shot to hell, that we all have to create our own environment and have to do things in different and exciting ways and, you know, beat the devil, beat the clock.
Absolutely. So what for you makes a good song?
Well, that's the magic. I have no way to answer that. I'm not a music critic, but it's only, in my case, it's a song that I fall in love with. And what makes a song that you fall in love with? I fall in love with a lot of songs. With Send in the Clowns, with Both Lives Now, with Someday Soon, with Amazing Grace. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a varied kind of, it doesn't have to do with genre, certainly. Right. It has to do with what hits you in the solar plexus. That's what makes a great song. And they're great songs for different people. Different people think Certain songs are great that I wouldn't walk around the corner for. And I think certain songs are great that nobody would pay attention to. So it's very, very personal.
Right. How has your voice changed?
It's gotten better and better.
And it has, and it's got much more.
It has to. It has
Yeah.
to. You know, I was lucky because I had a lot of training. I had a great teacher and taught me a lot of things. Taught me to take it easy. Taught me to be clear. Think about the phrasing. Make sure they understand the words. If they don't understand the words, you're wasting their time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That sort of thing, you know. So I've been very lucky. I had good training, but I also work very hard at it. I don't work very hard in the sense that I practice all the time singing. I don't. But when I'm working, I know what to do. I know how to warm up. That's a big plus right there. Mm-hmm. I know how to warm up, and I know how to shake, rattle, and roll. So those are probably the secrets, if there are any.
So for artists like you that have just thrived as your careers have gone on, how do you maintain your old audience base, and then how do you get a new audience base? Because if I've been to a Judy Collins concert, and you have people in their 60s coming with kids in their teenagers.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. I love that. I'll tell you, I think part of it is that there's a memorability about a lot of the songs. Of course, they were in people's lives at a time when they were young and in love and probably trying to get their lives going and so on, and that's very helpful. And also, I think I've had a lot of very faithful fans throughout the decades because I've not changed really, but I've made some direction decisions that were very counter to what was going on. For instance, in the 60s, in 66, after I'd made a number of traditional albums and also a number of singer-songwriter albums with guitars and songs by Eric Anderson and Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan, I brought in a wonderful orchestrator, and I did in my life, which had a lot of orchestrated things on, although it did have and it had a wonderful version of Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues. And then I did an album that was totally orchestrated. My Wildflowers album, I'd started writing songs, and also Both Sides Now was on that album, but the album is fully orchestrated, and I didn't know how much trouble we could get in for doing that. I because I was thinking about music and art and, what the songs wanted, and I wasn't realizing that I was really breaking a lot of the rules. But people came right along with me. They saw the transition. In other words, they were following the artist rather than the genre. I suppose that's part of it.
Sure. I also love, Miss Collins, how your songs get updated. I'm not sure if you've seen the London production of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but there's the most incredible arrangement in the show of Both Sides Now.
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's incredible.
Good.
Rolls and flows of angel hair, ice cream castles in the air, and feathered canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, and now they only Now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads, they say I've changed. But something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. I've looked at life from both sides now, win and lose, and still somehow it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at
Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell. Judy Collins with Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops.
Thank you.
So I'm going to turn this over to my co-host Barbara, who has some questions about your literary pursuits.
Oh,
Oh, how are you,
okay.
Miss Collins? So nice to talk to you. Thank you.
And you too. You.
I am probably the original library lady, so books are my passion, and it was just
gosh.
just so wonderful to see the breadth of your work in terms of beginning with memoirs and then doing a lot in terms of the creativity concept. What prompted the writing at that stage in your career?
Well, I'm one of those people that grew up thinking I was supposed to be writing a great American novel.
I love it.
We grew up on great books. We were read to. We read. I wrote. I was always writing. I was always writing in my journals. I was always writing my dreams. And when I did a songbook in 1969, I was having this affair with Stephen Stills, and he said, "Well, you have such an interesting family," whom he knew most of. I guess he had not met my father. I met him about 2 months after my father had died in '68, but he knew the rest of the family, knew the story. He said, "I think you should write a few chapters in your songbook about where you came from, what this wild family was like that you grew up in." And so I did that, and there were 7 chapters, and it whetted my appetite for this, and it took me a while, a few years, before I wrote my next big memoir, which was called Trust Your Heart. Mm-hmm. And again, it's kind of the full story. It's in a way, it's told in a journalistic manner. I kind of use a timeline and a journal approach to it. And then came a novel called Shameless, which I wrote in '90. It was published in, I guess, '95 or something. I worked on it for a long time. I wrote about a bunch of books, some memoir, some not. I wrote 3 books for torture. One was about the suicide of my son.
Yes, ma'am.
So it was really a treatise on suicide, and
Correct.
it's still in print, actually they may print it on order, I don't know, but people do find it when they have that terrible situation where they need to know what kind of hell they've fallen into. And then I wrote a book about creativity and one about surviving terrible loss, which was intended to be just about suicide, but my editors over at Tarcher said, no, you have to open it up more. What was my last book? My last book was Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, and
Yes.
I guess I've written 9 books in all. I wrote a book about Amazing Grace. I wrote a book about songwriting and the piano, sort of a history of my relationship with my piano in a book called Voices.
Oh, I love that.
And now I'm publishing in next year a book about food and my relationship with food. And that's coming out. It's called Cravings, and it's coming out in January of 2017.
I love
so
it.
I'm still at it. I apparently have a lot to say.
And that's wonderful. I know one of the key lines in one of the introductions was this. It said, "The sacred is always expressed in remembrance." And I think that's what we do. There is power in the story, and that's what we remember, the story. And to be able to tell that and tell it so effectively and beautifully is really a gift that you've chosen to share with us, and I thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure, and also it's my preoccupation because, like you, I'm a book fiend. I have a disorder called the compulsive reading disorder because I have to be reading all the time. I'm always reading one thing or another, either mysteries or histories usually. Mm-hmm. But I do spend an awful lot of my time reading.
Ms. Collins, how did that tragic portion of your life reflect in your songwriting?
Well, I've written a number of books about my son. I mean, about my son and songs about my son. There wasn't any way that I could get through that. And I've just had another one of these horrible losses. I had my youngest brother. I have three brothers, and one of them died last week.
I'm sorry.
Friday morning after a long struggle with cancer. This cancer killer is really terrible.
I know.
And, he was Denver John. He was my youngest brother. He was the youngest of the three boys, and I have a sister who's younger than he was. But anyway, that's a big, terrible blow. So what do I have to do? I have to write about it. There's no question. Mm-hmm. And I'm in a songwriting phase right now anyway, so who knows, but that I'll have a song that will come out of this. Certainly I will try. But it's one of the ways that I think if you're an artist, you have to paint it or write it or sing it or dance it or, do something with this hole in your heart.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So back in the 60s, Miss Collins, the music reflected so much of a political strife in the country. Do you see that reflected in the music now, just because the whole political, socio nature of the world seems so much smaller because of social media? Do you see music impacting that as much as it did in the 60s?
I don't see it. It's not in the same way, I don't think. Although there are iconic things that always happen. Certain songs that come through that make a difference. And if you go to a lot of folk festivals or music festivals, you'll certainly hear quite amazing songs and new writers all the time. And I try to keep up with some of it, not all of it, but I try to keep I think the main thing is the story. Your friend said, it's about the story, and it is about the story. When it comes right down to it, all of this is about human nature, whether you're singing We Shall Overcome or, Let This Little Light Shine. It's really about human nature, and the stories are terribly, terribly important. Right.
It's funny because with all the political commercials that came out, it was Bernie Sanders, Simon and Garfunkel, East of America, right?
Oh.
That kind of cut through everything.
Yeah, it was kind of wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there were no words of his until the very end, which is the required one, and I think that's where the power was, because that song resonated with so many of us.
Yeah, very true.
Boy, Barbara.
Oh,
I know. She's biting. She's eating at the chops.
Oh, I know. If you had one favorite in what you've written thus far, Ms. Collins, what would that book be? Do you have a favorite one, or do they all kind of create a synergy for you?
You mean in terms of books?
Yeah, in terms of the books you've written.
Well, I think that the book on suicide is very important.
Right.
It's really not about me. I think the book about food is important for a lot of reasons. So, my story is interesting, but really the things that I've gone through, I think, are more interesting, and the things that I've gone through that other people go through. So maybe that's the connection, I guess. that it's something that we all have to deal with. We all have to deal with life and death. We all have to deal with food. We all have to deal with addiction of some kind. I think most people have one or another. They either smoke or they drink or they eat or they steal or they lust or they something. We've all got something, and that's sort of what the similarity is. And I think part of people identifying one with another is that we share a lot of similar stories.
That's right.
Yes, we do.
And it can be catharsis for all of us to have voice, to have you give voice to that, and that's the important part.
Absolutely. So our 20 minutes almost up, Miss Collins. I want to make a deal with you. When Cravings comes out in January, will you come back on the show and talk about the book?
Oh, sure. I'd love to talk about it with
that's
you.
terrific.
Love it.
There we go.
Good.
Thank you, Miss Collins. You're a joy.
Oh,
and,
you're welcome.
okay, and good luck at the McCullum Theater. We love Palm Desert. And don't do too much shopping out there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. Thank
is.
you.
Exactly.
Thank you, love. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Long before we ever touched, long before we knew too much, I wish we were strangers again.
Long before we ever kissed, long before I ever missed you, I wish we were strangers.
The curtain is now coming down on another episode of Showbiz Nation Live with Michael Roberts. Make sure to visit showbiznationlive.com and ubnradio.com for information on upcoming shows and to listen to past episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and please support your local theaters and arts organizations. I'm your announcer, David Friend. See you at a show.